system approaching perfection.
We'll walk deeper into the belly of the beast if it means I'm able to further limit
There's a system approaching perfection. There's a system approaching perfection.
The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans. Another day closer to victory.
All right, welcome to the Crypto Show, and today I am talking with Colin Cantrell with Nexus.io, who is going to be another one of the speakers at Anarchapulco, and he's got a great workshop, so you definitely want to come and see that. Colin is, I guess, a prodigy. I mean, your dad is a rocket scientist, and you've just got these. Every time I talk to you, I'm baffled by some of the stuff that you do. So, tell people what Nexus is, and kind of the problems that you hope to solve with Nexus.
Yeah, Nexus is kind of we're based originally after the original Bitcoin source code, and now since then that's all kind of been dusted into a little folder called Legacy, right? Nexus, just the meaning of the word, means a connection or serious connection linking two or more things. So the project itself is designed to encapsulate a lot of different realms of thought, but on the technical cryptographic software side of it, it's a peer-to-peer network, right, that allows you to have a decentralized currency. And it really, we're focused on solving a lot of the issues that blockchain's been plagued with, such as, the trilemma, scaling, security, and usability. Losing your private keys. It's horror stories. People, uninstall a Bitcoin wallet on their phone and it's gone, right? And also, new levels of decentralization, like our mobile wallet actually runs a node on the wallet on your phone, so that you don't have to talk to a proxy. Like your BitPay wallet's talking to the BitPay servers who has the actual Bitcoin wallet. Even though you sign the transaction on your own, you still require their services to get that blockchain state. So we managed to even just get that running down on the mobile devices. So we're decentralized maximalists. We believe in decentralization being a solution to most of the world's problems, and mathematics being the way that you can enforce that, right? So Nexus is just this collection of projects that basically, are all connected together, focusing on different things. You have the blockchain cryptographic aspect, which, solves a lot of issues such as, decentralized login. Smart contracts can be built with web developers so that you don't have this barrier of entry for all these expensive developers and their need for it. It also augments just the web with login systems. I mean, it built a database that runs constant time, which means it doesn't slow down, handles hundreds of millions of requests, 450,000 requests per second. So, all these different layers of the software to help augment and really promote decentralization, because in order to really create true decentralization, it takes a lot of technical capability, right? And it's been a long haul. I mean, we're at 7 years, almost 8 years now in designing and implementing, and the network being live, since about September 23rd, 2014. So, they're all essentially connected together, right? And, the software is there to help promote that, right? So, Nexus is also kind of a way to think, a way of life. Is just, hey, man, we want freedom. Now we got tools, which is Nexus, in order to create that freedom, right? And in order to have that, it needs to be functional. And as far as I see it, blockchain just isn't functional for the greater population of people yet, right? It's, you send to a wrong address, your coins are gone. You uninstall your Bitcoin wallet on your phone, your coins are gone. You don't set up a recovery, or, there's all these little nuances that have prevented a lot of people from being able to utilize it. So we focused on solving those problems first, right? And then it's kind of grown also into a communication infrastructure, because the internet's hopelessly centralized. And I learned this by going to the Internet Engineering Task Force quite a bit. I'm spending a lot of time with some of the fathers of the internet, such as Dino Farinacci, who was the first fellow of Cisco, right? He worked on Milnet, ARPANET, and all that stuff. So I learned all about IP. And from that, I learned that the internet, as we know it, is hopelessly broken as well. I mean, IP version 6 has been out for 20 years, but it's still not propagated because it's hardware defined. And there's all these extra protocols that have had to been built on the internet to make it function. And so it was designed, or hopefully designed, to be decentralized, but it's not there yet, right? So there's also the Nexus protocol that weaves in with all of this, and an operating system that essentially uses this blockchain as one aspect of a larger framework into an operating system, and then into microsatellites to develop our own internet, essentially, that we build ourselves, right? So Nexus is kind of software to run on this hardware that people can then invest in and then earn.
I wanted to touch on that too. The I guess the motto or whatever for this year, the catchphrase for Anarchapulco is unstoppable. And
Yep.
you have something called Unstoppable Internet.
Yep.
And you guys weren't you guys working on the whole Skynet before Elon?
Oh yeah. I had the idea way before his Starlink, and I mean, he's trying to solve an old problem, right? 5 billion people in the world don't have connection to the internet. Facebook tried to solve it. Google tried to solve it. He's trying to solve it. Really, if you look at the terms and conditions of Starlink, it's a claim on Mars. When you actually sign up for a service for it, you're admitting his claim on Mars, which is he's just full of a bunch of stunts, right? But what we're focused on is like the internet needs to be democratized and owned, right? Right now, it's owned by cables, right? I mean, governments have big cables that are strung between the continents, right? And they control those cables, so they can shut those cables off whenever they want. Cuba, good instance. Lots of protests in Cuba, shut off their internet, right? So the internet isn't a free communication system anymore, right? It's owned by all these different oligarchs. And so we need to actually look down onto the hardware level. So I've been working on that architecture since about 2015, right? Like the satellite internet concept, but there's so many questions to answer. Like, how do we get frequency licensing? Because that's an ITU international thing. How do we get the distance? How do we make it democratized? How do we even make it incentivized, right? Like, why would I put up a satellite? Like, why, and we can't do it all ourselves because that's centralized, right? So all these models over the years have kind of finally become fully formed. And there's a white paper that we released on December 21st, 2020, that really outlines all of that. And it ended up being working through an operating system as well that will help augment security of IoT devices. It'll create a seamless interface. It'll basically link all your devices, but unlink your computer from your hardware, which means your computer will then exist as your Nexus SIG chain in this whole decentralized cloud file system, right? And then your hardware will be a window into that. So you could go throw your computer into a lake and then log into your Nexus SIG chain on another computer, and boom, everything's back, right? So it's taking computing to another level, taking the interface to another level, along with adding that internet protocol aspect to it, and making it so that, hey, in my local area, we can buy ground stations and we can start providing internet access for each other, right? And I can start producing content delivery, and engaging in geospatial contracts, and it's a geospatial routing system. So actually, IP addresses won't exist anymore. I've basically created a whole new stack, and this is what my presentation is going to be about: Unstoppable Internet. It's called the One Stack. The internet right now is built on what's called the OSI, so it's Open Systems Interconnection, and that's it's a rough model that the IETF uses, right? IEEE uses layer 1 and layer 2. IETF is layer 3 and up. I've created the One Stack, which stands for Open Nexus Execution Stack, right? And that has its own 7 layers as well. And Nexus is kind of woven in as a part of that, and then the operating system low level, protocol is down in there as well. So it'll interoperate with IP, but it's kind of like, think of having a phone number. You have an IP address that changes. You go to Wi-Fi or you go into your LTE, your IP address is changing, right? So if you're trying to talk to someone or someone's trying to talk to you, they're like, oh, where's Danny? I don't know where he is, right? Oh, he's on this Wi-Fi now. And so you can't really, do that. And that's a big problem plaguing peer-to-peer, right? Bitcoin has hundreds of thousands of nodes, but you only have 10,000 of them connectable. So, that's a lot because of that incoming thing. Now, imagine if you had an IP address that doesn't change, right? That your locator changes under that. So that's part of the stack, as well as you have a cryptographically verifiable identifier, which means nobody can pretend to be Danny. No one can source packets from your IP address. And it also, being on a hardware and wireless level, it prevents DDoS attacks. So I've, from studying all of these headaches that Dino went through in designing protocols and learning from the IETF, I've taken this and presented the architecture to the IETF working groups before I even wrote the paper on it to test it, right? Over a number of years. And they at first they tried to attack it, but then they were like, well, dude, I think you're onto something here, man. Because it's
and before anybody comes, oh yeah, sure, how are you going to get it in space? Well, you kind of have a connection to space, don't you? Was your father was kind of like co-founder of SpaceX, right?
So Elon Musk originally wanted to send mice to Mars, and that was his original plan. He wanted to make humanity an interplanetary species, and he was eyeing Russian rockets, right, or Russian ICBMs to get some cheap firepower to go up. And my dad happened to be an expert in Russian aerospace, so he reached out to the Planetary Society, which was started by Carl Sagan, who was a friend of our family, the pale blue dot guy, the astronomer. He ran a show for a number of years, and then, Lou Friedman was running it at the time. Lou directed Elon to my dad. And then my dad took Elon to Russia, and there was this whole thing with the Russians and the Russians laughing at Elon, and Elon getting on, and then he types on his computer. He's like, we can build these ourselves, you know? And then that's the starting of SpaceX, right? And it was my dad and one other guy. And so then my dad, you know, reached into his pocket of contacts and, you know, helped build the original team, right? You know, from different places and stuff. And, you know, I think he left it after a year or two because he didn't, you know, foresee Elon really being able to succeed. And now he focuses on building small rockets, right? And so, yeah, there's that background. And then I also have my own lab as well. So I do my own research. This is for serious technology and research.
I had your dad on one time, and he told me the worst investment that he ever did was when he dropped out of SpaceX. Yeah, he could kick himself. And then he said the best one that he ever did was when you gave him Bitcoin a lot, when you had some kind of hippie commune down in Arizona.
I needed it. That was before that. So this was, I think, 2016, man. I had a couple root canals I needed to get. And it was just like, hey man, you know, he's like, hey, just give me some of that Nexus. And I was like, okay, here you go. He made out pretty well on it, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's been a fun project. And like, you know, what's really cool about what we can do with Nexus is you create these tokenization economic systems bounded around hardware that allows you to create incentives where you weren't able to do it before. That's why Facebook and Google were never able to do it, because there's no market to make fiber and copper going to all these billions of people, right? And then having to charge them for money when their economies are destroyed, right? So you really have this fundamental economic issue, which is why people don't have access to the internet. So how do you solve it? You solve the economic issue. And that's where we've done by creating economic value in places there was no value before. You buy the hardware, you install the software, now you can start earning money in a complete crap economy where you couldn't do that before, right? And then that builds and builds, and then that creates more value in these areas, more people accept, you know, and it creates these economic pockets that grow themselves because the people that buy it are actually able to get a return on that hardware. Instead of your router costing you money and then you have to pay a monthly fee, it becomes the reverse of that you buy a ground station and then you charge a monthly fee. Your computer becomes a business, right? You run a computer program and you provide value to other people that they need while you get paid for that in return, where you now have economic opportunity you didn't have it before, right? And that's the big key. That was the big ticket, solving that. And the frequency licensing issue too, which we managed to solve using 5.8 gigahertz unlicensed ISM and, you know, really large phased array antennas, you know, with enough elements that you can get really high gain. I mean, based on like 802.11ax, you can get up to 10 gigabits per second on 5.8 gigahertz beam per sat, man. So we're talking like massive bandwidth. That's like, it's like 2 gigabytes a second, right? A little less, 1.5 gigabytes a second maximum, right? You'd have to have really good signal strength and really powerful antennas to do that. But that's what the 5.8 gigahertz, that's the maximum that it can carry at 1024-bit quadrature amplitude modulation, because you use QAM. So as you go to more symbols, you get a higher error rate. So you have to have a stronger signal, but you get a higher bit rate, right, through. So, you know, there's lots of really cool things that have kind of emerged as it's grown. And then finally the routing system, you know, IP just doesn't work. It's not going to work for this mobile moving system, because IP addresses have to be registered. The IP registries are owned by different corps and different companies and different people, you know? So like the internet we have is kind of an illusion of the freedom of communication and freedom of information, right? And really information is a huge part of growth, right? I mean, I was studying what caused the Dark Ages. One of the big reasons the Dark Ages happened is the collapse of the Roman Empire, right? Into the Eastern and the Western Empire. A lot of the roads fell into discondition, and there was a lot of crime and thieves on the roads. So people stopped traveling and information stopped traveling, and then they burned a lot of books and information was gone, right? And thus the Dark Ages. So, you know, in order to have a golden age, we need to have the ability to freely exchange information and to record that information in a way that it can't be corrupted or manipulated, right? The fish always gets bigger every time you tell the story. We need to eliminate that. And so that ties it all together. So that's why it's Nexus, right? All these things are interlinked, right? You got the Nexus protocol, which is your fundamental hardware protocol that, you know, is an operating system that runs Nexus as a part of the operating service on the operating system. And then you have Nexus proper, which has the blockchain that augments a web framework that you can, with web developers, use. Whether or not you want to use blockchain, the blockchain provides you all these additional security properties, such as, you know, you log in with Nexus, keyless login systems. Then you tie that into IoT devices, right? All your locks on your house can be picked. There's only one lock that can't be picked, right? That's what a locksmith does. They pick your lock, right? Anyone that has a set of lockpicks could pick your lock. So we live in the illusion of security as well, right? Now imagine if you use cryptographic mathematical correlations and code that says access patterns, like, hey, Danny, you can come over between 4 and 5 today, and, you know, it'll open up as long as you show me a signature with a key that I've authorized from you, right? Boom. you have all these new security properties that can be integrated. And if you're not familiar, IoT is really bad security. I mean, those Nest thermostats, they'll get you hacked. They're just, I mean, they still leave admin password to access some of these things sometimes, just because
Yeah,
they're
I
all.
remember, what was it, Slockit? Wasn't Slockit the
Oh, yeah.
project that led to the Ethereum hack? Or
Yeah. Those were the guys, Slock.it. They were the ones that
yeah,
made it. Yeah. So yeah, you get all this like, yeah. So there's so many, and this journey of Nexus like brought me down into the operating system where I'm just looking at this and just like, wow, there's so many architectural limitations of even operating systems, right? I mean, OS X is based off of the original BSD Unix, right? Windows now is based off of their NT kernel, which was built in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? So it's all just lipstick on a pig. They keep adding, and make it look prettier and shimmery, but there's still all these fundamental flaws in the operating system that need to be reassessed. And that's why we kind of came down to the operating system level too, because you package your router and your new system, your new Nexus protocol into the operating system. And that's how you really gain a lot of adoption. That's how TCP/IP got adopted, is Unix integrated a TCP/IP stack in their operating system, right? So the operating system targeting, the first iteration will target just raw hardware, IoT devices, and Cube satellites. The second version will become consumer grade, right? So we're focusing on building up that IoT and satellite connection, just, which will be able to run, so you get, access to the internet, and you also can start, having safe IoT devices, and that builds out because think about supply chains. People want to transport. There's a lot of people want to integrate blockchain supply chains together.
right.
So this makes it safer, and these architectures are also not just ideas I pulled out of a hat and thought were great. I always put it to the test, right? So like I've tested this at IETF, which is where the internet is created, right? That's where all the people standardize all of the RFCs, and it's like the wolf den there, man. I mean, everybody there's like 60, and they think they know everything, and here's this young kid coming in, and it's like, what does this guy know? But I got out unscathed, completely unscathed.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
presentations at
I wanted to
DEF CON.
get into your class. I know one of the topics that over the past years in Anarchapulco has been the octalogs and all this, and this kind of leads into what your talk, not your talk, but your workshop is going to be about. Tell me about your workshop, the title of it, and what that means.
Yeah, it's a new social architecture. So the octalog, that whole concept came from the research of John David Garcia, who did, I think, 20 or 30 years of studying what's the most creative combination of people, right? And he kind of found that about 4 males, 4 females creates, a really strong creative, pursuit. But then, I looked at and studied all these decentralized architectures, lattices, octalogs, whatever else, and they all usually fall apart at about 1,000 people. Right? They kind of implode, and everybody has to go to a hierarchy of some form, right? Because life is formed in layers, but the conventional systems that we see are these top-down hierarchical authorities where the board is at the top, they create their C-suite, then they create their managers and blah blah blah, and authority travels from the top down, right? And so they don't really care. It's just when you're moving up, all you do is you suck up to the person above, right? But that's not really, I think, how nature works. Nature is not an authoritative matrix or an authoritative set of layers. It's more of a responsive set of layers, right? As you get to higher layers, you get a more complex requirement of response, right? As you increase in vibrational complexity, just like if you look at cymatics, which is very interesting. If you haven't seen it, you take a sand and you put it on a speaker and then just run a frequency generator through it. And at certain frequencies, you'll get actual complex geometric patterns that get more and more complex as the frequency increases. So think of it like that, right? So I've created kind of a bottom-up social architecture that's a stack, but it's a meritocracy. So it's designed where those of higher capabilities will rise more to the top, and it has a checking and balancing mechanism on each one of these layers. So I designed it kind of in the midst of facing a lot of like corporate raids and stuff in 2018. Man, went through a lot, and it actually it worked really well in like disassociating corruption, right? And so we've been running almost 6 months now on Nexus with this full social architecture, which is basically a DAO, and it's taking the concept of the starfish and the spider into a social architecture, right? Because social architectures haven't really been reassessed for thousands and thousands of years. It's just king, peasant, feudal lord, presidents, kings, right? It's the same stuff, right? You have some central figure, some central leader. This isn't a work towards having a functional decentralized system that also eliminates the corruption and also eliminates that propensity for people to idolize certain individuals within that structure, right? That's one thing that I found, with Octologs is that, there was a propensity for like one cell to gain more notoriety than another cell. And even though you have this lattice, it's still going to form this layer. But then if you don't properly define the protocol, when you don't leave it well defined, then that wiggle room is where corruption likes to do its thing, right? And so it's a defined social architecture that we're also turning into a cryptographic enforced system that allows you to really scale to any amount. I mean,
I was going to ask that. Are you going to apply this to a DAO and maybe package it as a product?
It is a DAO, yeah. I mean, it's gonna be software encoded on Nexus. Right now, we're in the manuals human programming element of it, where we've got our processes. We're doing like the formal, like consensus rounds and stuff like that in the videos, and each one of the arms has their own budget. So like we've gotten that all flowing now, and once we're kind of debugging it right now, we're running the program, running the architecture, and it's been running, dude. I mean, it blew me away. I mean, when we first launched it, it just flushed out all the people that were like there for themselves or trying to manipulate it. It flushed them all out, man. Just cleaned it up. It's really cool. And we call it a starfish because it's got 5 arms, and a starfish you can chop in half and it forms 2 starfishes, right? You can't kill a starfish. But a spider, you chop off the head, it's dead, right?
Well, so I'm definitely going to be sending this episode to Chuck Williams, a guy who used to work with Dash, and he's got kind of the same idea. I think
he's working on Ludum Vitae. His is more of an incentivized social structure. We've talked quite a bit about Ludum Vitae. His Ludum Vitae is really interesting as well. This is less about incentivizing work and more about focusing our energies together as an organization. Because a lot of times you get large organizations, everybody's butting heads. And that's what creates a dysfunctional organization. When you have power struggles or people aren't working together, or like, I want my idea and you want me idea, me. So what this does is it defines a protocol that allows us to focus our energies together and scale to any level. Like a 3-layer system where you just have 5 arms, and those 5 arms are composed of 5 groups of 8, and then each of those groups of 8 is 8 groups of 13, and it follows a Fibonacci sequence. That's 520 people for one starfish, right? And then you add to groups of 21 as the cells grow through the Fibonacci. You go up to Dunbar's number, since that's the maximum number of stable relationships any individual can have, which is about 144 people, right? When you get up to 144 people in one starfish, you're at billions of people, so it's never going to get that big. But, groups of 21 goes to 10,920 people, so it scales exponentially, right? It also maintains integrity because anytime you want to move up a layer, you have to be voted in by your group. So if somebody's a chair of an arm, they're actually still a facilitator of a group of 13, and they have to be voted into the creative layer. And then from the creative layer, they have to be voted as the chair, right? So that it bubbles up the most capable people. But then they have a quarterly election cycle, so anyone can challenge them any quarter, so that they don't have like a well-defined, like, I am an authority. They're more of a representative of their peer group, right? And they represent the budgets or the requested budgets, and also, the tasks. Like once you get to the creative layer, that's more of like a higher level task creation layer, where the groups of 13 are more like task execution layers, because you have some people that just want to come, do what they're told, and go home and, do their thing, right? And they don't really want to think too much because they don't want to have that complex of an experience or that complex of a responsibility. This allows everybody to find the place where they want to be, but it's based off of merit and capability.
It sounds like a good way to find people's strong points in an organization, and then drive them to the area that they would work the best.
And it scales too. It's also a big attempt at social scalability, because I watched EOS, I watched Ethereum. They don't socially scale. DAOs don't socially scale, man. They just don't. This creates an aggregation environment where you get that scalability. So the 5 chairs can communicate with one another and, communicate for hundreds of people as that information's aggregated up, right? And then also a checking and balancing on every layer. You have to be voted in every layer. And if I'm a chair of an arm, right? And then that would make me, a facilitator, a creative facilitator, and then also, a base working group member. If I get voted out of my working group on a quarter, I'm pulled all the way from the chair position, all the way down to the stack. So it's bottom up, right? The bottom has the authority, and that, will be cryptographically authenticated. We'll make it into an API. So, you'll just be able to fire up your own DAOs when fully automated with code. Right now, you don't want to run immutable code until the algorithm's perfect, right? So we're in the testing phase. We're in the beta phase right now, running it. And it's been run for 6 months, and it's kicking butt, man. It's doing really good. Like I've been really surprised with actually how well it's been working, and how when you give people autonomy and their own budgets, like they're just, dude, like it's growing. It's like its own self-growing organic structure. You know, like I just get to be the Tau working group guy now. Like I don't, everything's just like, you know, fully consensus based. So yeah, that's going to be our workshop, and it's essentially it's a new social architecture that's designed to be more symbiotic with the way nature works, right? With the way our nature works, and also, you know, in a way that makes us all more effective together, and in a way that reduces politics and corruption as much as possible, so that we can have, you know, healthy creative working environments that also scale socially, right? And then cryptographically enforces consensus based off of monetary, you know, some sort of monetary resource, right? So the consensus regulates, I guess, revenue or income. So you can actually run this into companies like, you know, for profit, nonprofit, whatever else. And then this ties in with a whole other wave of other things too, like that we're doing with, so, you know, with serious technology and research and all that. Like that's the lab, right, where we're building and modeling the hardware. Like right now we're working on Adreno mesh networks, you know, parametric resonant hydrogen fuel cells, basically for new batteries that just hydrogen water-based batteries. Studying electrokinetics as well. You know, there's certain effects with electricity, you know, like high energy microwaves or, you know, asymmetric capacitors charged to high voltage that create certain propulsions, right? Just with electricity. So if we can get that correct with, you know, a source of electricity through parametric resonance and water, and we can get electrokinetics working correctly, then we also have new potential technologies that will allow, you know, to, I mean, I ultimately would like eventually to be able to just have a little drone or the sat, even just to be able to launch itself. You know what I mean? With certain electrokinetic reactions and stuff, like, because chemical rockets are cool, but they're a little bit old school. They're pretty dangerous. They're somewhat unreliable. And you have a really tight tolerance between the weight of your fuel and actually your payload. So that's the biggest part of engineering a rocket is you need enough thrust to overcome the weight of the chemical fuel that you have to bring with you to get you there. You know what I mean? And then you have this small little margin of a few kilograms that you get your payload on, right? And so, you know, I believe that, you know, electrogravitic or electrokinetics are like a type of technology that's probably like what other, you know, like to get to true space travel, we need something that doesn't rely on chemical fuel, because chemical fuel carrying that weight of it is just going to limit our capacities. So like we kind of hit a lot of different points, you know what I mean, with Nexus. And like Nexus is kind of like that nervous system membrane that links all these things together. But, you know, the world, you know, people need technology. I believe technology can help us. It can give us the tools to free ourselves, right? To free and expand our minds and to be more sovereign, right? And that's really the fundamental goal of everything, is to give us those options, right? You know, that we didn't have before, right? Through new.
Right. Well, so everybody knows this is a free workshop, so definitely sign up for it. And, you know, pick Colin's brain. He's always happy to talk to everybody. So I'm glad to finally see you coming, man.
Yeah, dude. This is my first Anarchapulco, man. You've been trying to get me here for years.
Here for a long time.
I didn't feel like the vibe was right, man. Like I feel like this year though, I was like, all right, Danny, you got me. I'll go this year. I feel like this is gonna be a really cool one this year, man. And then doing the workshop, it's cool because the DAO stuff is ready now. We can do a little DAO workshop, you know, show people how to implement it, because it could solve a lot of problems. I mean, even, dude, I've seen intentional communities, like all these things. They're all hierarchies, man. Nobody has any models that work for managing ourselves in a democratic way. It always just becomes this, hey, who's got the most influence? And then everybody builds around that influence, and then they create their own power, you know, pathways and stuff, man. And it just, so it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited. This is, it's going to be fun. I appreciate the invite. I think it's going to be great.
This has already run way longer than I've planned, but it's always great information. And I always love talking to you, man. So,
likewise, man.
Yeah. So we will see you in Acapulco soon, and definitely sign up for the workshop and come see us talk. It'll be on the last day during Cryptopulco.
And during the workshop too, I'm going to talk about some other legal structures that you can use to protect yourself. We've got, I'll explain. I don't want to reveal it all right here, right now, but we're working on some templates and stuff and some legal frameworks that we can also operate within that gives us legal protection, right? And it kind of plays on certain jurisdictions. And it's something, it's a bit of a legal backdoor that gives us a pretty incredible protection that also ties in with the DAO social architecture, because
okay.
So
I know.
I'll explain that a little bit.
So
too.
I talked with yesterday. I talked with Ladar Levison, and his talk is going to be about cryptography as a Second Amendment right. things using cryptography to protect yourself. So
Yeah. Well,
that'll be
we got
neat.
that. We got the cryptography. Okay, you need the cryptographic protection. That's higher law, right? That's always, that cannot be changed no matter what, whatever. But even though you got that higher law, you need to have some legal protection. So we're going to cover, the cryptographic and then the legal protection, which is what do we operate under? Do we operate LLCs, nonprofits, blah, 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 right? To have a legal, and we found some pretty interesting ways to do it, right? So that's one thing I want to present and share, but I've been just verifying with lots and lots and lots and lots of lawyers to make sure it's sound before I present anything about it. And then the third and final one is the actual social architecture, which is kind of like code for humans, right? And it's interesting, like coding for humans, because it's all like behavioral models. You know what I mean? Like people map code from one another by observing behaviors. So like you create these processes and then they mimic the processes. It's interesting, like to get into the human coding, right? But that human code, right, those processes, those protocols will then also be augmented with the mathematical cryptographic enforcement of that. And then you can put all of that within a legal structure that gives you a certain autonomy to basically protect yourself. It doesn't mean that the executive branch can't come in and try to mess with you, but it does mean that every case will be thrown out, right? If you do the models correctly. So we're setting up a lot of these for, serious, for like, naturopathic medicine and stuff. And I want to present that here with you guys too, because there's lots of applications of this as well. And then the social architecture DAO model fits within that for regulating this legal structure, right? And then the cryptography to enforce our higher law above that legal structure. And within that, essentially, we can do whatever we want. So, we regulate ourselves mathematically, internally, but then we have the shell, which is our legal protection, right? And that's what gives us unstoppable organizations, unstoppable social models, unstoppable internet protocols, unstoppable networks. That's what this social model is really designed, right? It's a starfish. There was this spiky starfish in Australia, but they overfished this one type of I can't remember what type of fish, but it they overfished it, and so these spiky starfishes started exploding everywhere in population, and they were killing all the coral. And so they're like, okay, let's go. They get swords, and they go down and they chop all of them in half. They doubled the population. They're like, how do we kill these damn starfishes, right? They had to eventually find this certain poison to stab them with and kill them, because they chop off an arm, the arm walks off and forms another starfish, right? So starfishes they're a decentralized organism, because every arm has all the internal organs it needs. It doesn't hold them in the central core. It holds them in each arm. So an arm can just go off and then form a new starfish. So this social model does that too. It's an unstoppable social model because it's a starfish. It's a network, right? You could break this model in half. You could cut off an arm and that arm can go form another starfish, right? And it's a template that you can apply that allows you to just focus all your energies towards a common pursuit, which could be any common pursuit, right? And it's a self-balancing, self-resolving system too. So it doesn't have to be managed or maintained. You just enforce the protocols, right? And you enforce them mathematically or through your own internal bylaws, however you decide to do it. And it takes care of itself. It builds itself. It grows itself. It scales itself, because we have like 5 arms on the ambassador side and 4 arms on the developer side right now. Each of those arms, they're forming base groups of 13, and then they're creating their new layers. Like there's like social media forming their nodes. So you got like your 8 nodes that form like your 13 leaves of 21, and so on and so forth. So it's like this growing organic structure as well that can also like say, hey, this structure grew to 1,000 people. Let's go through a starfish mitosis or whatever. It's modeled like as a fractal almost over how our cells operate, right? Cells of like mind join together to create tissue. Those tissues join together to create organs, and all of those things have a functional purpose in the organism. This is essentially that, but with people in a higher level of complexity, right? Because we have a more complex experience, but still creating a protocol in which we all can form these cells of people that we resonate with more, and they self-balance and self-organize, and so the system resolves itself. And it has a tolerance of about 40%, which means 40% of one starfish could be corrupt the entirely. So I mean, with 520 people, you could have 200 people that are completely goners, right? And the starfish could still resolve itself. So it applies some of the consensus blockchain-based, Byzantine fault tolerance is only about 30% for nodes. This gives us a 40% attack resistance, right? So you could infiltrate it with, you have to get above that 40% threshold to try to bring down a starfish, but that is only the internal starfish's ability to balance itself. But you have 3 starfishes, right? And a 2/3 multisig. So there's checking and balancing on every level of like bad things happening or corruption coming in. And that's, like I said, it tested it and it flushed out the people that just weren't aligned, and it's self-balanced. So it's really interesting to see. It creates a really interesting contrast, right? Like just the way it's designed and the way information flows through it. It contrasts the people that are more like self-motivated versus like, consensus motivated. Like the people that truly believe in decentralization love it. The people that say they believe in decentralization because they really want to develop some sort of influence through that, they don't. And I've seen it happen. It flushed them out, dude. Every one of them that just identified and flushed them out, and they got voted out, and it balanced itself. So it's a really interesting architecture. And consider this presentation. It's still in architecture. It's still in development. It's still being implemented. We're probably at like high beta phase right now. Once we get to the full code in 7.0, I'd say it's final. But I wanted to present this to get people thinking about it. We can demonstrate how it works. And also, if there's feedback you want to give to it, it's an open protocol, right? It's open source. So, I want other people to be able to build on it and, to present it here. And if you run your own organization, and you need to test out, new internal self-governance systems, if you're, too busy reviewing everybody's shit all the time or whatever, being, the owner, like try it out, man. Like I have time now. Like people don't bother me anymore, dude. It just like as it itself, it's great. So yeah, it's going to be cool, man. I'm happy.
Awesome.
It's going to be cool to be able to present this. I've been developing this architecture for about 4 years, the social architecture, and studying human dynamics. That's part of my commune. It was also a human studying program too. I wanted to study like, it really was like, it was kind of funny.
It wasn't a David Koresh thing, but
yeah, it kind of became like a game show, man. It was like, you're eliminated, get out. You're eliminated, go. But, so studying human dynamics is really important because, like it kind of dawned on me in 2018, like, oh man, we haven't rethought social architecture for thousands of years. Like thousands of years. It's all these hierarchies and empires and feudalisms and, central figures, and decentralized, America was an attempt at it, but it's still, it's missing so many elements that it's become centralized again. Right. So, hopefully you guys like it. It's been a long time in the making. And like,
every civilization, like one of the most underrated movies that describes civilization is, do you remember the old cartoon Heavy Metal? Have you ever seen that? Yeah, go look it up on YouTube and watch it. It's just this, it's a cartoon that plays a lot of, hard rock music from the 80s. And then it just tells how civilizations rise and fall time and time and time again. And it's pretty cool. But, like if you're paying attention to it, I watched it as a kid and it didn't ring to me at all. It was just like, all right, this is cool. Barbarians and hard rock music. And I didn't actually see the story that was going on because I was a kid. And then later on, I watched it and I'm like, wow, this is some pretty deep shit. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you go for now. And we will see you in Anarchapulco. And peace.
Peace. Thanks for the time, man.
All right. Thank you. Let's see.